What if I told you that you could dramatically improve the quality of your life, your own well-being and personal fulfillment you get out of life by learning to think in a certain way? Alright, welcome back. Today I wanted to share with you a concept that I read in this book by Wallace Wattles. It's actually called The Science of Getting Rich. Now you might be wondering, that's an interesting title. So what is this going to be about? Well, in this book there's one chapter called Thinking in a Certain Way. It's chapter 8. Now before we get over this material, I wanted to kind of explain how this book came into my life, because it's kind of a weird story in and of itself. I started reading this book the very first time around January 2008. January or February, one of the two. I can't exactly tell you what date it was, but it was around that time. It's like almost 11 and a half years ago. There you go, I got it. So that's kind of a long time ago, okay? So what happened? Well, I actually kept reading this book. I read it every day. I study it every day. In fact, if you go over this from a distance, you see all sorts of stuff, underlined additional text that I wrote on top of the pages around the manuscript itself, because as I keep studying it, the more I start to understand the real power behind the concepts of this book. Now here's the thing, the very first time I read this book, there's a lot of stuff in here that might really make you wonder, like, this makes no sense. How could this ever improve my life? How could this ever benefit me? He uses terms that you might have never heard before. Well, that happened to me. There's so much terms in this little book that the first time I read it, I was 18 years old at the time, and I never met anyone that ever talked the way he did, or let alone write in the way he did. And that's what I realized. It's something more people might struggle at times when they first pick up a book like this. They might think, because it's so strange at first, it might not help them. Well, we're going to change that. We're going to get rid of that confusion and hopefully make it easier for you to understand this concept of thinking in a certain way. Well, I'll just be going over a few specific pointers of this chapter that I underlined that I thought was vitally important, and to explain it better. At the beginning of this chapter, Wallace wrote, "You must form a clear and definite mental picture of what you want. You cannot transmit an idea unless you have it yourself. You must have it before you can give it." And many people fail to impress thinking substance because they have themselves only a vague and misty concept of the things they want to do, to have, or to become. Now right there, he uses a term that's very interesting, thinking substance. He says, you must have it. You must have a clear mental picture before you can give it. And many people fail to impress thinking substance because they have themselves only a vague concept of what they want. Well, that was one of those terms that when I first read it, I was like, what does the thinking substance mean, man? Well, what is that? Like, do you ever hear that in general conversation when you're out and about, maybe at work with friends, family? Did you ever use that term? Hey, what have you been impressing on thinking substance? No. I don't think anybody really uses those terms at all in general. However, this is a book about metaphysics. So in order to make this a little more easier for you, we're going to work with another image. So I'm going to put it on the screen next to me like always, so you can look at it together with me. There's a few important parts that you want to remember concerning the chapter Thinking in a Certain Way. First of all, if you go to the top left side of this picture, it says mental faculties. Now there's two specific faculties that he talks about in this chapter. Their thinking and their imagination. Now what I realize is that most people have some sort of idea of what thinking means. They have some sort of idea what imagination means. But more often than not, it's actually the wrong idea that they have about it, so they don't really understand material like this. Alright? So if we go to the next page, where I underline another part, he said, when you try to impress your wants upon substance, remember that it must be done by a coherent statement. You must know what you want and be definite. Go over your desires, just as the man I have described went over his house. See just what you want and get a clear mental picture of it as you wish it to look when you get it. Now, that clear mental picture you must have continually in mind. As the sailor has in mind the port towards which he is sailing the ship, you must keep your face toward it all the time. You must no more lose sight of it than the steersman loses sight of the compass. Now, how can you do this? What exactly is he talking about? Well, let's look at this picture. In the middle you see that large circle again. It says the conscious mind. Underneath it says subconscious mind. This is what we're working with. Well, as he described, you must know what you want and be definite. This means in your conscious mind you have to think about what you want. However, this is a point that most people miss. In this chapter he briefly hints at it. He doesn't really go into it that deeply at all. But he does say that if you think about what you want, you also have to learn to be grateful. Now, what is gratitude? It's an emotional state of the mind. It's an emotional feeling that you get. So what we're getting at here is that if you know what you want, you have goals in your life, I'm sure you do, that you want to achieve. But if you don't feel an emotional connection with that thought, well, then it's not going to happen for you. And this is one of those issues people have. Everybody can think about what they want. It doesn't mean that you're emotionally involved with what you want. You see what I'm getting at? That is what we're talking about when we're saying thinking in a certain way. He went on to say, all you need is to know what you want and to want it badly enough so that it will stay in your thoughts. All right. Let me take you back into the past with this statement. When I first read it, I was like, how can having something in my thoughts help me to get what I want? Well, this is what we're going to get into over time, more and more. We have to realize what sort of influence our thoughts have over the results that we get in life. We have to start realizing how our thoughts influence our feelings and how those feelings influence our behavior. And then if we analyze it further, well, the way we behave, as I always say, determines your results. So without that awareness, if you don't clearly grasp the effect your own thinking has over the rest of your well-being and the rest of your life, your results, well, then it might make no sense to you to have something that you want in your thoughts and want it badly enough so that it will stay there. Now, this is what happens. If you have a clear idea of what you want, if you have that within your conscious mind, if you have the feeling of gratitude, you know what happens? Well, first of all, you're going to become excited about where you want to go in life. That creates an emotional response, but then that emotional response also starts to sort of color your thinking. It starts to cause you to think more and more optimistically. And then the more optimistically you think, the better you're going to feel. And then the better you feel, the greater your thoughts become. And it keeps going back and forth like that, while at the same time it starts inspiring you to do all sorts of things in a totally different manner when we talk about your behavior and the way you act in this world, therefore causing a change in your results. Again, this author talked about the same thing over 100 years ago. Imagine that. Now a little further on this page, he said, the more clear and definite you make your picture, the more you dwell upon it, bringing out all its delightful details, the stronger your desire will be, and the stronger your desire, the easier it will be to hold your mind fixed upon the picture of what you want. You know, this happens all the time. People can tell me what they want, but it doesn't mean that their mind is focused upon it all the time. Why? Because they're not emotionally involved in it enough. Now maybe you've had this yourself with certain goals. I mean, I talk to people in private at times, friends of mine even, and I hear them tell me like they want to achieve something, but then they might not feel motivated. Why is that? Well, maybe what's missing for them, and for me and for you, is that we're not dwelling on this mental picture enough. We're not bringing out those delightful details as he suggested, because the more we do that, the stronger your desire will be. And the stronger it is, the easier it is for you to hold your mind fixed upon the picture of what you want. Now he went on to say, something more is necessary, however, than merely to see the picture clearly. If that is all you do, you're only a dreamer and will have little or no power for accomplishment. Behind your clear vision must be the purpose to realize it, to bring it out in tangible expression. And behind this purpose must be an invincible and unwavering faith that the thing is already yours, that it is at hand, and you have only to take possession of it. That is one wild claim to read if you've never heard any such terms before. The first time I heard it, I was like, I have to hold to the faith that the thing is already mine, that it is at hand, and I only have to take possession of it. It's like if you think of your own goals, can you grasp how this would work? Well, maybe you don't. That is one of the difficulties we have. Well, what he's saying again, and something that I've started to realize for myself, is faith might as well be considered an emotional state. You trust in your dream. You trust in the mental picture. Trust is more emotional, where you know, like, I can trust him or her, it's alright. You don't question it, you don't think about anything else. You want to learn to do the same thing with your own goals in life. You want to start having faith. You want to be loyal to your own vision of what you want. That's what we're getting at with thinking in a certain way. Now he went on to say, live in the new house mentally until it takes form around you physically. In the mental realm, enter at once into full enjoyment of the things you want. Now, what do you think about that the first time you hear this? If you've never read this book. Live in the new house mentally until it takes form around you physically. That might sound really bizarre, but I have some good news. You can really do this. Now, it doesn't really happen in the way you might think it happens. We're not talking about your goals manifesting out of the thin air. It's like if you want to create more wealth in your life, we're not talking about it manifesting just out of nowhere and falls into your lap. If you want a new home, like he says, we're not talking about the home instantly manifesting around you and you suddenly got your home. Now what actually happens is that you learn to focus your mind in such a way that that clear mental picture gives you direction on where to go and where to move. And that is eventually what causes it to move into form around you physically. That's really what we're getting at here. Now, to make this more easier for you, let me go back just 2 chapters where he actually talked about a student of his who he suggested he does the same things that we're talking about here. And he said, I recall now the case of one student who was told that he must get in mind a clear picture of the things he desired, so that the creative thought of them might be impressed on form, the substance. He was a very poor man living in a rented house and having only what he earned from day to day, and he could not grasp the fact that all wealth was his. So after thinking the matter over, he decided that he might reasonably ask for a new rug for the floor and a coal stove to heat the house during the cold weather. While following the instructions, he obtained these things in a few months, and then it dawned upon him that he had not asked enough. He went through the house in which he lived and planned all the improvements he would like to make in it. He mentally added a bay window here and a room there until it was complete in his mind as his ideal home. Then he planned its furnishings. Now get this. Holding the whole picture in his mind, he began living in a certain way and moving toward what he wanted. And he owns the house now and is rebuilding it after the form of his mental image. Now, with still larger faith, he is going on to get greater things. It has been unto him according to his faith, and it is so with you and with all of us. Holding the whole picture in his mind, he began living in a certain way, moving toward what he wanted, and he owns the house now and is rebuilding it after the form of his mental image. That line, I got it underlined here. Well, you can't see it really. If I put it close, it is right there. Rebuilding it after the form of his mental image. Well, years later, I read it again, and I was like, that's interesting. Well, what I'm going to suggest you do from now on is take this example and use it in your own life with your own goals. What you want to learn to understand is that you want to rebuild your life according to the form of your mental image of what you want. Let that sink in, because that's exactly what I'm doing with this channel right now. With these videos, I build it inside my mind first, and then I'm rebuilding it after the form of those mental images. So I'm making these videos after the form of my mental image of what I would like it to look like. Now you can do this with your own goals. Really let it sink in. Think of all the things you still want to achieve and approach it from that angle. You're simply going to rebuild your life according to those visions, those dreams that are locked up within your heart. Now, if we go back to thinking in a certain way, the chapter. Near the end, he says a very important part when we talk about getting yourself emotionally involved, as the picture says again, your subconscious mind. Feel grateful when thinking of your goals. Well, this is what he had to say about it. Be as thankful for it all the time as you expect to be when it has taken form. The man who can sincerely thank God for the things which as yet he owns only in imagination has real faith. Well, he will get rich. He will cause the creation of whatsoever he wants. Again, really try to grasp why that is. That's the important part, because once you grasp it, you're good to go. Gratitude is an emotional state, as he suggested. If you can feel thankful for the things you own, as of yet only in your imagination, you have real faith, and you will get what you want. That's basically what it comes down to. So be as thankful for your own dreams as you expect to be when those dreams were a reality. Here we're getting back at that concept of what would you feel like if it were true. Live as though it were true, just as though your dreams were already a reality. And you know what happens? You start to develop again those patterns inside your consciousness that will help you express the dream over time. That is why if you can be thankful, you automatically stay loyal to that dream, because you're already thankful. But if you're not thankful, you won't be loyal. You're just thinking about it, but you're not dedicated. That's what you want to understand. That's what he's hinting at. It's such a subtle little text that he put in there. But after building that mental picture of what you want, be sure to connect your emotions to it by being grateful, being thankful, or as I like to say, by actually falling in love. By really making sure you're passionate, because it's a feeling. Be passionate. It's a positive feeling, a motivating force behind that mental picture that helps you to express it within your life. Now, near the end, this is what he had to say as well concerning prayer. He said, in order to get rich, or let's put it differently, in order for you to get what you want, you do not need a sweet hour of prayer. Instead, you need to pray, I need to pray without ceasing. And by that, I mean, Wallace said, holding steadily to your vision with the purpose to cause its creation into solid form and the faith that you are doing so. You know, that is some awesome text right there. By prayer, I mean holding steadily to your vision with the purpose to cause its creation into solid form and the faith that you are doing so. Have you ever looked at your own dreams from that angle? It's very powerful. In fact, that's exactly what I've been doing for the last few years with all my own goals. This is literally how I approach it. I understand that prayer in this sense means allowing my vision to move into form with and through me. So I have to stay loyal to what I really want, so I can keep being inspired and motivated to do something about it, to do something to make it happen. And those inspired ideas automatically come to you again if you hold that vision in your mind. That's what he's getting at. This was written over 100 years ago. Back then, people already started to discover this wonderful power of their own consciousness. And again, that power exists within you as well. You never should forget it. Now, to close this video and this chapter, he said, think and speak of all the things you have asked for in terms of actual present ownership. Imagine, again, an environment and a financial condition exactly as you want them. and live all the time in that imaginary environment and financial condition. Now, I have to stop it here for a second because, again, the first time I read this, you probably might have the same. You're like, this, again, how does this make sense? How could this even improve anything? Well, look at the picture again. You got what you want inside your consciousness. It will find expression with and through you in and as your life. However, he did warn, do not do this as a mere dreamer and castle builder. Hold to the faith that the imaginary is being realized. So look at the picture, it exists there. Hold to the faith that it's being realized and to the purpose to realize it. Remember that it is faith and purpose in the use of the imagination which make the difference between the scientist and the dreamer. Another way of how we could look at this is hold to the faith of your dream and that it will be realized, but also to the purpose to realize it. In other words, be dedicated to actually give it expression. Be dedicated to make it happen. Be dedicated to do whatever needs to be done that you feel compelled to do in order to make it your reality. That is the difference between the scientist and the dreamer, as he said. Because many people can think about what they want. They can have all these wonderful dreams and ideas floating around. Oh, I would like to be rich, successful. I would like to have a great relationship. But all of their actions are not even in harmony with that vision. Well, that's what he was talking about there at the very end. You have to hold to that faith. You have to stay loyal to your vision with the purpose to cause its creation into solid form. Meaning, you've got to be dedicated to make it happen. Now, if you look at the picture again, that is the process. You start in your conscious mind. It influences your subconscious mind, meaning your emotional states, how you feel. So the clearer you make your vision, the more you bring out all those delightful details. You know, those delightful little details? Well, the better you're going to feel about it, the more excited, the more you're like, I really want to make this happen. What happens then? Well, what happens with me is that I become highly motivated to take action on it, to do something about it. And these ideas that come to me, more often than not, were ideas that I didn't even thought of before I first generated this inner change of consciousness. That is what it means to be thinking in a certain way. So if you ever read this book before you didn't quite realize what he meant, hopefully you have a better idea of the process, because we're working with a process here. Even though the words might seem a little absurd at first glance, if you can have a picture like this to sort of have an idea of how it goes again step by step, it can ultimately make it easier for you to apply such a wonderful material like this man shared with us over 100 years ago. Even though I'm like a little sweaty because it's getting really hot over here in the Netherlands, I do hope that this chapter kind of helped you understand your potential a little better. Because the beauty of this all is that you, man or woman, have the ability to think. But we really have to start discovering and understanding what that means. You can think anything you want. And if you start thinking anything you want in terms of how you want it to be, well, that's when you're starting to think in a certain way. And that's the beauty. You can start right now wherever you are. No matter your circumstances, you can start right now to think in a certain way. So study this video, listen to it carefully, maybe a couple of times, really let it sink in and apply it towards your goals, those dreams that you still want to make happen. I promise you, things will improve and you will get closer to the realization, or perhaps if you really do it in the right way, you will achieve it regardless. I can guarantee you that much. Anyways, thanks for watching this video, and always remember that we are the dreamers.